Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our training today, Digital Advertising. This edition is specifically designed for nonprofits, advocates, and activists. I'm doing a second installation next week, which will be set up more for political campaigns. And I did realize when I was going through the slides one last time that I had hoped to put in more examples. So we will fix that for the next time I do a session because there's so much good work out there to highlight. And it really helps to see rather than just talk about. But again, thank you guys so much for joining today. This is being recorded and will be out on YouTube once I get done, and sometime within the next couple of days. And so I'll be emailing y'all links to download the recording. And if you want to follow up, you've got my contact information right there on the screen, and it'll also be in the follow-up email. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have questions, I really encourage y'all to ask questions. I learned from that as well. Please put them in the chat as we go. I'll be stopping periodically to check that. So with that being said, let's dive right in. So first off, though, who is this guy who is talking? So I'm Colin Delany. Howdy. If we haven't met, I've been doing digital politics since the tail end of the 20th century, back when it was websites, email lists, and a very few online discussion groups. So different world that we live in now. The advantage of that is that I've gotten to grow up with these tools. I think it would be quite intimidating to try to learn all of this at once at the same time. So I sympathize with folks who are new to the field and encourage y'all to specialize at first, pick something and learn it well, and then move on and learn other things well, because there's a lot out there. I work as a digital strategy consultant for nonprofits and political organizations. I am a political advocate myself for things that I care about, which I suspect you and I have many things in common on that front. I've been writing e-politics since 2006. It started as a blog, naturally, became an email list. And I took a bit of a hiatus during the pandemic, but I'm back at ePolitics as a Substack and still at epolitics.com. I've had a little trouble keeping up with it lately. I'm down in Texas helping my mom out for a while. We're having some health problems. So it's been a bit distracting, but I hope soon to be publishing a more regular stream of content there. Every year I write an ebook about digital politics and advocacy. I just update the previous version. The 2025 version should be out later this spring or early summer. And then I play bass in a kick-ass rock and roll band in DC. So I do advertising strategy, placement. Maybe the thing I'm most useful at is organizational digital strategy, coming into the top, doing it all in the existing program, helping people figure out how to get where they want to go from where they actually are at the moment. Email strategy, social media strategy, digital product planning, all the good stuff. So you want to follow up with anything, I'm always happy to chat. I love tossing around ideas. So I got started before the internet. I got started in Texas politics in the early 90s when I was a very young college graduate and had no earthly idea what was going on in the world. And they soon fixed me because politics in Texas is played as a contact sport. And if you ever have a chance to work for a state legislator, a state senator, a city council member, a mayor, any political job where you are down on the ground and interacting with the public and interacting with sort of the nitty gritty of decision making, I really encourage it. A lot of people want to stampede straight for Capitol Hill, but you're going to learn a lot more at the state or local level almost always. So, with that being said, it left me a very pragmatic approach to politics, and I think that's going to come through in what we're talking about. So, why do we advertise online? Well, the big reason is that's where the people are, right? The vast majority of Americans are glued to their phones. Even, the very elderly spend a whole lot of time on Facebook typically. They may not be TikToking, but they are probably out there looking at pictures of the grandkids. So regardless of who you're trying to reach, unless they're just completely disconnected, you have a good chance of being able to reach them through some kind of digital advertising channel. So typical goals, right? Now, this is, if we were in person, this is where we could do a little back and forth. And I could ask y'all to name some goals and come up with some things I hadn't thought of. But for right now, let's look at build lists is one of the very big ones. You see a lot of Facebook advertising, for instance, that's intended to help organizations build lists. There's also advertising in dedicated digital dedicated progressive activist spaces, which we'll talk about. You may be advertising to raise money or to build lists that's going to raise money. You may be selling merch, t-shirts, the classic tote bags that public radio and public television do. You may be running persuasion ads. You may be trying to change opinion, elevate an issue. If you're supporting someone running for office, you might be just trying to build name recognition, but it's basically to inject an idea or an option into the discussion. You may be trying to pressure decision makers, and we're going to talk early about some fun ways to do that. Getting people to events. Last a year and a half ago, I was running some ads for an immigration group that was holding a rally in DC, and we were targeting people of Latino descent in the DC region specifically to try to get them out. So, you see this kind of thing very often on Facebook, but you can run it in other channels as well. You may be trying to influence the online discussion, doing some kind of more of an opinion leader outreach, recruiting volunteers, generating website visits, highlighting important content on your site, reinforcing other parts of an online or offline campaign. I'll give you an example there that I may not touch on later. For instance, if you're a grassroots organization and you're going to be doing canvassing, you might upload a list of the people you're going to canvass to Facebook as a custom audience, which we'll talk about a little more. But basically, you upload them as a target list into Facebook, and then you hit them with ads highlighting your issues or highlighting your organization or your campaign before your canvassers go to visit the people. You can also do it for follow-up, but I think it's kind of cool to go out and try to I think it's pretty cool to go out and try to sort of prime the pump, right? Get people aware of the background of what you're going to be talking about before you do it. I have definitely heard anecdotal evidence that this kind of thing can make a difference in canvassing. And then finally, GOTV, getting people out to vote. And like I alluded to earlier, this is not an exhaustive list. There are many other things you may be trying to do, but this is just to get, a general sense. And I do want to say, I'm not going to be sitting here saying, okay, you click here to set up a Facebook ad. This is more of a strategic conversation of when to advertise, why to advertise, and then what channels are particularly good for different topics. And we'll also cover some general best practices. So fortunately, there are plenty of good tutorials out there about the mechanics of setting up particular kinds of ads. And if you're doing something through a vendor, like a programmatic ad, which we'll obviously talk about, then you will probably be using their help files anyway. So we're going to talk about the high level of the who, what, when, and why. So let us advance the slide here. So sometimes your goal is just to sow discontent. This is one of my favorites from back in the 2016 era when the Russian, was it the Internet Research Agency, whatever their troll farm was pumping content out of the American system. This was one of their ads. I do like Mullet Jesus. He's pretty cool there. I want to party with him. Now, in this case, they weren't, they didn't have a substantive policy goal. They were just trying to muddy the waters. And I would argue that these ads probably did very little compared to the sort of disinformation work that Americans were doing on each other. But it is an example of something that ran as an ad back then. Here are some examples of some of the more typical ads you will see. These are ones that I pulled off of various political sites a few months ago. I'm sorry, not even political sites, but things like the Washington Post in the DC area, right? So you have an array of different organizations there that are trying to influence decision makers. These are simple banner ads mostly, right? The main three, but you also see down there the mobile billboard. And I think this kind of multi-channel advertising is something that ought to be at least considered as part of a plan, right? So I'll give an example. When I worked at the National Environmental Trust 20 years ago, we were very Hill focused and media focused. It was DC based organization, Natch. So even back then, 20 years ago, I was creating banner ads to run on the Congress facing political publications back then. This is before Politico, before, Semaphore, before the explosion. There was like National Journal and a few others and not much else. And there was a print publication called Congress Daily that would go to Hill offices. So we would advertise print in Congress Daily, on the Congress Daily and National Journal websites. We had ads in the two metro stations, poster ads in the two metro stations that serve Capitol Hill, one for the Senate, one for the House. We had big display ads in the bus stops right by the Hill. We were also buying targeted cable that was only in some zip codes around Capitol Hill and only during the Sunday morning political talk shows, right? At the same time, of course, our lobbyists were visiting the Hill. This was, if I remember right, was for a campaign to get fuel economy standards increased. It was after 2006, so the Democrats had Congress, but the fuel economy standards had not been raised from the 70s, and we had to overcome a lot of opposition, even from the Democratic side, particularly from folks from the auto manufacturing areas. But so we hit people high and low. We had grassroots advocates calling in, emailing in, lobbyists calling in, emailing in. And the goal was to create what I like to call the illusion of ubiquity, right? Using highly targeted ads to make your targets think that you and your campaign are the only thing people are talking about. Sure, it's good on the Hill, but I think for a state ledge, it's even more better because they are, getting hit less. I'm in Texas right now, as I mentioned earlier, helping my mom out for a while. And I've seen a lot of ads around school vouchers because that's a major fight, even on the Republican side here. The governor has been trying to take out Republican legislators who do not support school voucher funding. So in a state, in Congress, members are kind of insulated, right? They've got big staff, relatively big staffs. They're flooded with messages. It's hard for any one thing to break through. In a state ledge or a regulatory agency, even, you have better luck breaking through the clutter. So think about the illusion of ubiquity and how careful targeting can create it as we go along here. So let's take a second and we'll go to the chat and see if we have any questions there. Yes, the next session. Thank you. There's a question about the next session. Would it be useful for folks running IEs on behalf of candidates and campaigns? I think so. It's going to cover a lot more things that are specific to electoral campaigns, regardless of who's running them. This is an excellent question. Most of the political work I do has actually been on the IE side, although I have been working on more political campaigns lately. And I've got to update my slides with some samples from there. So we will do that. So where do ads come from? Sometimes they're going to come from our friends, the robots there. AI, a lot of people, particularly on the progressive side, have been very skeptical of AI. We know that there are the environmental energy costs, the water usage for cooling, and I understand I definitely understand the ethical concerns, but it's also true that it is there, right? And the groups that you're competing with or fighting against may well be using it. So if AI can help you create more content in the same amount of time, it may well be worth your time. Coming up with, for instance, different variations for advertising. Now, if you set up an ad in Facebook, it's going to start recommending these days, it's going to start recommending AI text for you, text variations, which from a political point of view are usually terrible, right? Because they're pulling synonyms out of the air without any sense of policy nuance, right? So you'd be very wary of AI-generated content in a context like that. But I will point out some vendors out there. Change Agent is one. Quiller.ai, Quiller like a quill pen. Quiller, I'll include these in the follow-up note. But Quiller.ai and Change Agent. Quiller started out primarily fundraising emails, but they have branched out into other content as well. Change Agent started out more at the top level messaging strategy, but trying to help people come up with top level ideas. But they have branched out more into content creation too. So, but these have both been trained on progressive content. In the case of Quiller, they've been trained on many years of successful fundraising email variations, right? So it tends to capture our language better. And you also don't have to worry about your information. Anything you put into a public chat bot then becomes fodder for future searches. So just keep that in mind. If I'm going to use ChatGPT or something, I'm going to help me analyze some data or create like a memorandum of understanding. I'm going to delete enough or cut out enough identifiable information that somebody could actually use this to see what other folks have been, working on. So the specialized progressive AIs have some real advantages. You do, of course, have to pay. But those two I would take a look at if you're being overwhelmed by the amount of content you need to generate. But otherwise, ads can come from a lot of different places. They can come from someone who likes beer, like on the right there. A lot of internal brainstorming to come up with variations or ideas to try. Graphic and video designers, of course, can help with the process. There are plenty of vendors out in the field who would be very happy to, create your video or static banner or other ads for you, rich media. You may be getting content from partners, from coalition partners that you work with, from other external sources. Ads can come from a lot of different places. And I will point out that it really helps to be able to come up with a lot of different ideas. It's really hard for us to predict what's going to work. I'll give an example from the fundraising world. Back in '08 and 2012, when Obama was running, had some of the best fundraising email writers in the business. And they spent a lot of time testing messages, but testing content, and especially testing subject lines. And there were points where if they had gone with their gut rather than testing, if they had gone with the subject line that they thought was going to work best, it would turn out that they would leave half the money on the table that they could have raised, i.e., the testing showed that another subject line generated twice as much money because far more people opened the message than the subject line they thought was going to work. The same logic applies to ads. Testing different images, testing different text. For social media ads, especially Facebook and Instagram ads, because they're so visually focused, I will typically test the images first. I'll hold the text steady and the link steady, for example, and test like 4 or 5 different images, try to narrow it down. Whenever possible, I would encourage having faces. We're very drawn to human faces or animal faces, but you never know. I did a list building project, a petition sign up project for Save the Children Action Network a few years ago. And, I'm working with, it was early childhood education. So I'm working with adorable pictures of cute kids. And even there, pictures that I thought were going to be blockbusters sometimes would just fail, would just not get any or very many signatures. Whereas some other photo that I didn't expect much from might turn around and blow all the others away. So this is why we set up testing programs. And again, I would, the visuals are extremely important. So do not leave the photograph or the video as an afterthought. So where do you buy ads? Let me check chat. Okay. Remember, if you have questions, please leave them in the chat. Now, many of you, I'm sure, have bought Facebook ads, Instagram ads, same, user interface for the purchase. LinkedIn also has a self-serve platform. Google, of course, has a self-serve platform both for the content network and for the search ads that we're all familiar with. Plenty of other social sites now have their own ad interfaces. For down ballot candidates, a company called DS Political that I use for a lot of ad work there. But they have a self-serve platform specifically for down ballot candidates and local organizations. So you can set up video ads, banner ads, and it is pretty straightforward. And I believe they have templates you can download. But there are a lot of self-serve platforms out there. The thing is, though, if you don't use them regularly, they can be a real pain. If you have ever tried to set up Facebook ads and then not done it in a while and gone back, the user interface will have changed, and frequently it will have become a lot more annoying. So for that and many other reasons, a lot of folks turn to vendors, either big advertising agencies or small independents like people like me. And I'll give an example over there. Now, this was a project I was working on a few years ago around clean energy. This was one of many variations that we tested. We were running these ads in wind country, which is typically the Midwest, parts of the Southwest, and we were running it in counties that had a lot of potential for wind energy in the future. But this is Trump country mostly. So what we were doing with these ads is try to build the Facebook community before we started pushing a lot of messaging out there, right? So that we would recruit some people in a given area, get them active on the page, and then they become the ambassadors within their social circles, right? And we tested, several different text variations, several different image variations, and this combination of the three guys on the horses with the wind energy is clean energy, which is creating jobs, that outperformed all the others over time. And we knew this because, of course, we tracked it all. So this is the kind of testing you might want to do. And of course, it was testing that we were able to set up through the Facebook Business Manager, Ads Manager. Okay, so the advertising starts the process, right? But that's only the start of the process. You typically, now, unless you're just doing name recognition, you usually want people to do things. So now, a friend of mine mocked me for still using Hillary Clinton examples, but this is, I think, really useful because it shows the kind of continuity you want between the ad and the landing page. So what's there on the left is join the official campaign, say you're with Hillary. Over there at the top right is the page you would go to if you clicked sign me up, right? And notice they're only asking for email and zip. They're asking for as little as they need because you are wanting, you're trying to make it as easy as possible for somebody to sign up. And you can always ask for more info later. Notice that the ad uses the same color scheme, the same photo, basically the same shade of red even. And you might ask, well, wasn't this just their default landing page? No, their default landing page while this ad was running was the one in the bottom right. Same basic colors, less red, more dark blue, but still a different image, a little bit different text, and less continuity to the ad. So it's possible that the campaign had a dozen, 20 different versions of the Facebook ad they're running, and that I just happened to see the one with her in the red pantsuit. I'm sure it's pantsuit because it's Hillary. She became famous for the pantsuits. But they may have had different, 20 different versions with different photos, in which case I bet you they had 20 different landing pages with different photos. So the ad starts the process, the landing page seals the deal. And as we'll talk about, sometimes you're not even directing people to a landing page outside your site. You may be working with some kind of sign-up system within Facebook or within an activist community. So, about buying ads, creating ads. Let's talk about targeting ads. This is where I think so much of the real power is. Obviously, if you're supporting a candidate, you only want to reach almost always people within the candidate's district. Now, if you're trying to fundraise for a candidate, you might be trying to reach a much broader Democratic, or if you're Republican fundraising audience, right? But for so much of our work, like we're trying to get people to an event, we might geo-target. we're going to do a lot of, we'll talk about it a little more in a second. Then there's also interest targeting. Sometimes you might be buying data from a firm like TargetSmart or Catalyst or L2 that is basically using consumer data to try to identify people who are more likely to respond to a particular pitch, right? But Facebook has things like interest targeting built in. I believe YouTube has some as well. I haven't used YouTube as much, so I'm a little, I don't want to go out on a limb, too much of a limb there, but you can, for instance, I have been working with a marine conservation group for years that recruits people who are involved in commercial fishing, whether they're fishermen or they work in a fishmonger or they're a processor or they're a charter boat captain or a fishing guide. They also have chefs who rely on locally caught seafood. So we ran Facebook page building, like our page ads, like the ad with the three guys on the horses for wind energy I showed earlier. But we were running ads specifically targeting people who had expressed an interest in commercial fishing. So and we geo-targeted it to a series of very specific fishing towns along in the North Pacific Northeast, on the Gulf Coast, and all up and down the West Coast. A lot of really small towns that were focused around working waterfronts there. So we combined interest targeting and geo targeting. You can demographic targeting. Facebook has taken away a lot of these options, but plenty of other platforms will still let you, target by age, race, income, media consumption, much, much more. And I'm going to talk about these in a bit. We have custom audience targeting, which we've already touched on, which is where you're uploading a list to a platform like Facebook. You can upload lists to other platforms as well. Voter file targeting, this is a subset typically of custom audience targeting. There are vendors out there for things like programmatic video and streaming TV ads who have connected their data files, basically the advertising profiles that the advertising networks have on us as individual consumers. They've connected those data files to the voter file. So with a reasonable level of accuracy, I can target people who are in the top, they're judged to be, the top 30. Basically, their partisan score is 70 out of 100. So they are most likely Democrats. Their voting propensity score is, say, between 50 and 70. So they have a middle, turnout range. So there are people who are likely to support me, but may need a nudge to go to the polls. So that is a typical use of voter file targeting. You can do some of that in Facebook. You can perhaps take an export from a van or a file from Catalyst or a list that you purchase from TargetSmart. And you can either upload those or import those as a custom audience for targeting. The problem with custom audiences is that the match rate is not always very high. If you don't have phone numbers, email addresses for the people on the list, you're likely to get a pretty low match rate. And of course, Facebook does not show you what the match rate is. They don't show you how big the audience is. So you just have to kind of experiment and hope for the best. Targeting based on behavior, we'll touch on in just a second. So let's look a little more at geo-targeting, right? So here's a district map from south and southeast of Richmond, Virginia. You may, even if you're doing issue work, you may be targeting specific legislators' districts, right, or specific Congress members' districts. So you can also be city, county, state, zip codes. When I was targeting people in wind country with ads on Facebook, we were targeting, I think, about 900 or 1,000 separate zip codes. So I just had a big spreadsheet and would copy paste into the targeting window there. Let me admit one person. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining, Kate. And electoral district, obviously, but you can also do arbitrary lines like geofencing. I worked on one campaign for a whistleblower organization that was trying to recruit whistleblowers who worked in big container ports, places like Houston, Long Beach, a couple in New Jersey. It was around human trafficking, wildlife trafficking, smuggling, this kind of thing. And so the vendor, we worked with a vendor to draw a little box around each of these ports and target the cell phones who went in and out of those boxes with ads later. Now, this campaign, it was an interesting experiment, but it turns out that trying to recruit a whistleblower through an ad is too much of a lift for an ad. It is just too much of a jump for one person to make. We might have had better luck had we tried to, some kind of interim step to get them in the door. But yeah, so sometimes your ads don't work. And in that case, we found out quickly enough that we just stopped spending money on them. So keep that in mind. We were also, alongside these programmatic ads we were running that were geofenced, we were also targeting people who worked in those ports through LinkedIn. And that's a good example of LinkedIn for profession or job targeting. So demo targeting: age, race, gender, voter status, voting propensity, partisan score. I mentioned both of those. Both of those are going to be modeled by a data vendor. It's not something that's in the voter file. In some systems, you can target by digital consumption. Like, for instance, if I have a limited amount of money to reach a certain group of people in a certain area, I know I need to reach, people 15, 20, 25 times for a persuasion ad to start to break through. I may be wasting my money on someone who doesn't go online much because they won't even have a chance to see the ads often enough for it to matter. So one way I could try to concentrate my spending might be by targeting people who are online a lot, people who have a high digital consumption score, because that way I know that they're going to have the chances to see the ads, right? But yeah, like I said, race is a lot harder on Facebook than it used to be. After the Cambridge Analytica scandal, they got rid of a bunch of our options. The target age, gender, and interests. And sometimes you can use interests to get at other parameters you might be trying to target on. But things like the voter file, with any vendor you're using, the voter file is going to have been matched to consumer data. So it's going to have things like race and um, income level, things like that. So tons of interesting options out there. So the first thing to do is either ask or poke around in the system you're using and see what you can find out. Simply going into Facebook Ad Manager and going to the interest window and starting to type. I didn't even realize that they had state ledge districts in there. You just have to know the exact words to start typing for them to show up. It can be very frustrating. Okay, let's see if we have any more questions here real quick. No. All right, folks, let's keep going. So specific targeting. We talked about demographic targeting, which is going to, wrap people in a bunch of groups. But the specific targeting, this is us going after individual potential donors, potential voters, potential opinion leaders. So the data models can come, can be donors. Very often, you'll get, have any of you received a bunch of text messages in the last years from political campaigns, right? Your name got bought and sold. So you were on a list of potential donors. As I talked about in my list building training a week or two ago, a couple of weeks ago now, using a purchase list to email to can be very, very bad, work very badly for you because you're going to get marked as spam. It's going to hurt the deliverability. It's going to hurt your messages going out to everybody who did sign up for you, right? But you can take that list of potential donors and use it as a custom audience. The one good way to use a bad list, right? So you have someone's old campaign list, you have someone's old donor list. If you upload it to Facebook as a custom audience, you can treat it as basically you're going to go fishing in that pond. It's perfectly ethical to do so. People, you're not opting anyone into anything, and you're letting them self-select. You're letting them tell you that they're interested. So the data models also might include people of particular demographic groups. Last fall, I was working with voter lists, targeting lists in Facebook that were people who matched some sort of idea clusters, people who share common sets of values that are defined by some breakdowns from Grow Progress, an organization. So we were doing persuasion testing and actual persuasion work, and we were trying to see which messages resonated, which content resonated with different specific slices of the electorate. So we had these lists. Target Smart had taken the Grow Progress data and turned it into actual voter lists in battleground states, and the project I was working on, paid to access those. And yeah, you might also have data models that are potential supporters. Again, perhaps they come from another organization. And I will point out that, again, in that list building training from 2 weeks ago, and I'll include a link in the follow-up email, in that list building training, we talked about a lot of good ways to use data and advertising in a lot more detail than I can get to here for list building. And then custom audiences. So we think Facebook immediately, but a lot of platforms will take an uploaded or imported list. If you're doing political purposes, won't. Like, for instance, YouTube does not allow, any Google properties do not allow one-to-one, individual voter targeting, or any individual one-to-one targeting. Like, I know the exact people I'm trying to reach for political campaigns and issue group or independent expenditure groups. For issue campaigns, I'm not exactly sure what the rules are, but the trick with YouTube is it can be very high volume, but good for persuasion, getting messages out there. Again, if you're doing political work, the poor targeting may kind of offset some poor in the sense that you're going to waste a lot of your impressions on people who, for instance, aren't registered to vote. If you're doing, C3 work or C4 work like that, YouTube is probably not going to be a good bet because you can't, do that one-to-one targeting. But so we've seen one good way to use a bad list. So you can also take a custom audience of any kind and turn it into a look-alike audience. And Facebook emphasizes this, but there are plenty of other platforms where you can do it too. Now, I'll speak specifically about the Facebook example. I could take my own organization's email list, upload it to Facebook, or my own organization's donor list, upload it to Facebook, create a lookalike audience, and then target the people in that lookalike audience. Now, it is people who look like the people on your list across all of the variables that Facebook knows about, right? Your demographics, of course, but also who your friends are, the kind of content you share. They have a pretty comprehensive picture of each of us. And if you have Facebook app on your phone, God knows how much data they have on you, right? So when I upload a list and want to do lookalike targeting, I'm going to select like a degree of lookalike. And if I understand it right, if I do a 2% lookalike, that's the 2% of Facebook users who are most like the people on my list. And so you can use that for list growth. You can use that for instance, I'm about to help an organization with a petition campaign, and they're doing a lot of work on the ground. They're in New York City. They're doing a lot of work on the ground. We're going to take the list of people that they've built on the ground, upload it to Facebook as a custom audience, create a lookalike audience, and then use that, test a couple of different levels of lookalike, like test a 2% and a 4%, and see what kind of response we get. And then we'll, like I mentioned earlier, we'll refine the content over time, testing different images, different asks, different text, and even different ad units. But that's a good example of how you can take one piece of data or one set of data and use it for a totally, perhaps totally different purpose, right? Now, retargeting, again, we primarily think of it as Facebook, but if you'll remember the Zappos ads, that if you went to their website, Zappos ads would follow you around wherever you went online, right? It got kind of annoying. They did it to such an extent. But a lot of vendors, a lot of different kinds of ads, you simply put a Facebook pixel on your website, which is basically a little bit of code on your website. They kind of, just like you would put a Google Analytics code. And then if you've set up the system in Facebook itself, when someone goes to that page or to your website, then you can capture them as a targetable audience. And you can get pretty granular, right? So you may want to create an audience that is people who went to a donation page but did not end up on the thank you page. So they went to a donation page and didn't complete the donation. So you might hit them with an ad encouraging them to finish that donation somehow, right? Either expressly mentioning it or just reiterating the ask you made the first time. I mean, after all, the phone may have rung or something. They may have gotten an urgent text and just completely forgot what they were doing. But there are a lot of uses for Facebook Pixel like that. If you're content website that has content on a number of different topics, right? You might use pixel tracking to target people who land on different sections of your website, turn those audiences into lookalike audiences, and then promote content out to people who are like the people who are already reading your site. All kinds of, you're limited only by creativity and then what the platform will allow you to do. So let's talk kind of at a 10,000-foot level of the different kinds of digital ads. And there's a Stand with Martin O'Malley banner ad over there to the side. He's back in the news because, under Biden, he was running Social Security. So he's the one who made the prediction that in 30 to 90 days, because of Musk and Doge, Social Security is going to collapse. So we have heard from Martin O'Malley a little bit more. But so let's just kind of go through these, and then we'll talk about how to choose among them and give some kind of examples of how and when. So video ads, right? When you go to a website and you get either a pre-roll ad, which is pre-roll is an ad that runs before or in between videos that you're watching, or you get a video ad that actually displays on the screen. These are typically targeted programmatically, and banner ads are the same kind of way. So by programmatically, I mean, when you buy the ads, you are functionally participating in a bidding system, right? Now, this all happens way behind the scenes. But when you set up an ad campaign, you've submitted a bid and the characteristics of the people you were trying to reach, right? A list of IDs, typically, if you're going from the voter file. Otherwise, it could be, more demographic targeting. But actually, I'm wrong. I believe it is individual level targeting by the time you get to this system. So you may have entered demographics, but those have been converted into a list of people to hit, right? Anyway, when one of your targets goes to ESPN or a news site or a fashion site, or a game, online game site, there is a bidding process that happens behind the scenes in microseconds that determines which ad they're actually going to see, right? So you can definitely tell, like as election day approaches in a battleground state, it gets more and more expensive to reach people. Your cost per thousand tends to jump up, and that's because you're having to work hard to outbid everyone else who is there. So these are the ads that, and like those Zappos ads, these are targeting an individual person. They're targeting a list of people. Streaming TV, very similar. Streaming has the advantage of it may show up on a bigger screen. It may reach more people if several folks in the house are watching the movie or watching the Prime ad supported channel or Hulu or Roku, wherever your ads are appearing, right? You may get a little bit bigger audience. The downside is they are more expensive than web video ads and pre-roll ads. Not everyone is watching streaming video with ads, right? You're going to typically reach more people with the video ads. Banner display ads work similarly. It's just instead of a video, it's usually either a static image or a series of static images that rotate through. LinkedIn ads we touched on, more expensive than a lot of other social options, but they can be very highly targeted. For instance, if you were organizing nurses or teachers, something like LinkedIn may make really good sense for outreach. again, I would run some tests and see what kind of results that you get. But the LinkedIn ads are not actually terribly hard to set up and buy. I actually worked with someone, I was teaching her how to set them up so she could do it herself, but a year or so ago who was doing an online training and wanted to reach people in the DC area who were nonprofit communicators. So and so, she was doing it specifically to build her own nonprofit practice. Yeah. So search ads, Google ads, if you're a nonprofit, you may well have a Google grant that gives you a lot of free Google ads. Search ads catch people when they're interested in a topic. I don't see them as much as I used to. So I do wonder if they have the same kind of reach that they used to have. On things like AI search, if there's an AI search at the top, I may not see, even on a desktop, a Google search ad at all. But again, these are, if you're running for office, I know we're nonprofits today, but you may want to have run ads on your issue opponents, right? If you're in a fight over a particular issue, run ads on the other side and run ads on their messaging, right? If they have a tagline or something, so that if people are searching for it, your content is what shows up. Little tricky bit there. Candidates generally want to run search ads on names as well. YouTube, talked about a little bit earlier, very broad reach, potentially very good for persuasion. I would test it if you're trying to do some kind of conversion or recruiting to see if it's going to be very effective. And then again, if you're a political advertiser, there are some strict limits on targeting. But yeah, consider it. It's usually going to be, for me, something that you need to have a big budget or it's not worth the time. Where with Facebook and Instagram, I left off Instagram. It should be Facebook and Instagram. You can do tiny campaigns. You can run a $5 boost on a piece of content because that may be all you need to do that day, right? With Facebook, I think it's very common and I think it's generally a good practice to set aside a small amount of money every month to boost content on your page to make sure that your followers see your page, right? Your followers stay engaged and active so that they continue to see content from you. $5 here, $5 there. It can actually make a difference. Yeah. And at this point, Facebook is organically only going to show a couple of percent of your followers any given piece of content on its own. So if you have fundraising appeals or action alerts, you may want to put a little money behind them so people see them. Also, if you have a piece of content that's performing really well organically, consider putting some money behind it because you'll get a multiplier effect. If it's performing well organically, if the boosting helps you show more people, then you will hopefully get more of that. Basically, it's going to perform well no matter how someone sees it, so you're going to get more of a ripple effect. But that's just a basic Facebook page. Facebook page also has the ads manager where I can run sophisticated A/B tests. I can set up ads with multiple images or multiple video, maybe only one video, but and have more sophisticated targeting options than I do just for boosting. If you're going to be running campaigns at scale, you want to be working through the ads manager and business manager. Unfortunately, they do not make it easy to figure out how to access that or to set it up for a new project. Just bear in mind that anything you do with Facebook is going to involve teeth gnashing frustrating. Media websites and local media websites. These can, especially for, like I said, local campaigns, taking over every ad slot, doing a homepage takeover on a local newspaper or a local TV station may not cost as much as you think, right? And it tends to get the attention of the local political class, the journalists themselves, bloggers, social media influencers in the area. Like campaigns will sometimes do it on the first day of early voting. You might do it when a bill is going to get introduced or a bill is going to come up for a committee hearing in your state or something's going to come up at a city council meeting, right? Sponsored content. This is the ads that don't really look like ads. Some of the programmatic vendors can actually sell that. You may also be advertising in email lists or specialized publications where you're doing sponsored content as well, where, in someone's Substack or, a local union's email newsletter. You may be able to buy a spot to plug an event you have coming up. These are often, pretty cost effective, but you have to negotiate with the publications, the publishers, the people who maintain the lists. You have to go with them individually. Podcasts, there are podcasts in digital radio. You can reach out to individual podcast hosts or producers to advertise, to set up custom ads on shows. There are also networks of basically, chug and plug. You can go to a network and buy ads across many different podcasts at once. I would do a little Googling to find some good options for that. Digital radio, the rules have been in flux around political and issue ads with Pandora and Spotify. They can be very effective, again, because of the niche nature of so many digital radio, either channels or the way that the algorithms are predicting content for us. The downside with digital radio is that it may be hard to get enough repetition. And remember, we are often trying to aim for 15, 20, 25 repetitions to even have a chance to reach somebody. Influencer marketing. A lot of us do organic influencer outreach, but there are platforms that do paid influencer outreach as well. Social current, as social, and then current, Currant, is a good example. People First is another one. These both work on the left. And then you may just approach an influencer, someone who is influential in your community or within a demographic group that you're trying to reach. You may approach them directly, just like like a podcast host or anyone with an audience. And then there are dedicated activist communities. Woof! We have a lot of options here, don't we? This is more for list building, historically at least. But we can also do it, petition signatures, emails to Congress, that kind of thing. Care2 has been around a while. I imagine some of you have used them. Daily Kos has a big online community that you can advertise to. They're a big blogging community. And a lot of political campaigns have used them for list building, and certainly nonprofits as well. Civic Shout is a newer example. And I will give them a shout out because we collaborated on my list building training the other week. And besides now with Care2 and Civic Shout, you normally are doing things like you're running sponsored petitions, right? It's a petition sponsored by you. If someone signs it, they have the option of joining your list. But Civic Shout now has a more traditional advertising option. In this case, it's my old client, Save the Children Action Network. And this is a very recent feature. So this ad is, and you can save despite a judge's order to restore billions in frozen funds. This is an ad that is, in the now. So when someone is interacting with petitions on Civic Shout, they might see an ad like this pop up. And in some cases, it might be sending people back to your website where you have content you want them to access, or it might be an action like here, like send a letter to Congress. So how do we choose? And let me check the comments real quick. Okay. As we are getting toward the end. Yes, we are getting toward the end. I'm going to run over, so this will all be in the video. So video ads, persuasion, sometimes direct response. They can be programmatic ads in particular, can sometimes be surprisingly affordable. I haven't seen them work as well for fundraising. They obviously don't have a social component. And as we've talked about, YouTube is its own animal as far as targeting reach goes. So I would, if I was considering a serious video campaign, I would be doing a compare and contrast on programmatic video and programmatic streaming versus YouTube. Social ads, good for audience building, obviously engagement, some niche targeting, interest targeting, demographic targeting. A lot of groups use them for fundraising or for building lists that turn into fundraising. And again, I talked about this a lot more in the list building training from a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, excuse me. Social ads generally aren't as great for website visits, but your mileage may vary. You may find that they are kind of work in your case. Over time, like over the last years, they have become less effective. And I already touched on the problems of matching custom audiences to lists of Facebook users. Search ads, as we said, good for targeting people when they're interested in something. They're designed to deliver website visits. They can be really useful for rapid response when an issue has gotten out and people are searching for it, but your content on it is so new it hasn't had a chance to show up in organic search results. So getting Google ads out there on targeting queries that are related to the topic you're trying to promote, or the name of the politician who screwed up and perhaps texted war plans to a journalist. If you're working for a privacy organization, you might have something to say about that. Podcasts, niche publications, sponsored content, influencer marketing, activist communities like Daily Kos, Care2, Civic Shout, good for reaching very specific audiences. These platforms typically know a lot about their people and can help you tailor your ads so that you're going to reach exactly whom you need to reach. Now, the details and the content will depend on the specific outlet, right? They are different from one channel to another, and you typically have to set up the ads individually with each outlet. But again, like I mentioned, there are some platforms out there that will allow you to buy ads across a lot of different podcasts and audio content at once. So good practices, tailor your presentation to the medium. If you are running a Facebook ad, you want to catch people's eye. And a video ad, you got to start with a bang. People will tune out a video ad in the first second or two. So, TV ads can have that slow burn, right? That you build toward the end. With digital ads, that's almost always deadly. Now, it does, your mileage may vary as always, but with TikTok, you want to have ads created by people who understand TikTok. Now, you're not going to be running political ads there, but you may be, slipping in some issue ads somehow. But start with a bang with video. Repeat, repeat, repeat. We're typically trying to reach people 20, 30 times. Now, if it's a direct response ask, like a give us money, you may not be reaching them nearly as often, right? You're going to find out real quick whether they're going to respond or not. But if you're doing persuasion or awareness, repetition is everything. Whenever you can, appeal to emotions. That's one reason we focus so much on human faces, animal faces. Speak to the heart, not the head. Test, as we've talked about, test text, test video variations, test calls to action, and especially test imagery. Because you can sometimes see a twofold difference between one photo and another and how many people click on the link or otherwise engage with the ad. Try to reach the same people several different ways, right? You may be reaching the same person via Facebook and Instagram, but also streaming TV or web video. Experiment with different targeting options. And this is important, monitor the ad delivery. Unfortunately, I have had an ad running for a month that I only thought was going to run for 3 days and paid accordingly, right? So you need to monitor the delivery in part because it may not be delivering, something may have gone wrong, but also it may run longer than you need it to. So we're going to do a compare and contrast, two different ways to do list building ads. Here's a classic link to a petition from from the DNC. But you could also nowadays use what are called lead generation ads, which are designed to keep people inside Facebook while they're taking the action. So Facebook pre-populates the lead gen form, and these are originally designed for salespeople. So these would be sales leads, but for us, it might be volunteer recruitment, it might be petition signatures, it might be list building for donations. But somebody can take the action without leaving Facebook, which in theory boosts the performance rate. However, a lot of groups that are going to be doing list building in bulk will test an ad that just links to the petition versus an ad that uses the lead generation unit within Facebook to see if one actually in practice outperforms the other. So here's an example of a media takeover on the Washington Post. Over to the right, the Planned Parenthood ad. This snippet is that there were Planned Parenthood ads all up and down the page. There was a big banner across the top. There were others in sidebars. There were others interspersed with articles. My friend who was running Planned Parenthood's digital Spend at the time said, yes, it was as expensive as you would have thought. But for local paper, it might not be as expensive. And then example of hitting people from different directions. This is again electoral, but it is through a C4. The Hometown Project recruits celebrities who grew up in targeted state ledge districts. In this case, we were working with the Michigan Democratic Party. And Ernie Hudson, the fourth Ghostbuster, and a legendary Hollywood character actor, was supporting the candidate in his hometown of Benton Harbor. So we run ads like this when I work at the Hometown Project. Nowadays, we run these as web video ads, voter file targeted to specific swaths of the electorate. We run them as streaming ads. We will also upload a van export as a custom audience, and also probably run some just general geo-targeted ads at the same time, knowing that we're not going to be able to match everyone on the custom audience list, right? And then, of course, the campaigns in some states, the campaigns themselves can actually share these videos organically. In other states where the coordination rules are different, they're not able to. But we were trying to hit people in any way that we realistically could. And on a project last fall with a really big budget, we were actually able to run some YouTube ads as well. So for districts, no, that pretty well does it right there. And the goal was 20 or 30 repetitions per targeted voter. So these were persuasion ads. So that with those examples, I kind of wrap things up here. I know that because we've gone over, it's down to just a handful of us. If you have any questions, I'm happy to stay on after the recording's over and chat. So with that in mind, I think we will draw this to a close. And thank you again for showing up today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with y'all, and I hope I will see you next time. And everyone who signed up for this will get a link to the YouTube version of the recording. So thanks again.